weather here in
This
Northern
meeting is being
California
recorded.
and like here in the Bay Area. So I was out on the trail today repairing and doing some things. Still got my hat on here. I am Georgette Howington. I'm Contra Costa and Alameda Counties coordinator. I've been a nest box monitor for 24 seasons, never gotten tired of it. And I learned something every single year, and even more than that, even more often than that. There's always something to learn. It's really fun. The California Bluebird Recovery Program averages over 16,000 successful fledges annually since 1996. We welcome you to learn about what we do, how, and why, and assist you in starting trails or installing backyard boxes. And some of you just are curious and you want to see what we do, and that's great too. We may be able to match you with existing trails through Wild Farm Alliance or farms and in vineyards. So hang tight for that. Dick Blaine, our program director, is with us handling Zoom matters. Our website and board member, Trisha Jordan, is with us this evening for a short time. And she's a board member, and she also manages our website, has designed and created our website, which is really beautiful now. And she went to all the trouble to post all of this presentation online for you under Getting Started. So if you have questions, please write them in the chat room, and I'll do my best to answer as we go. We will answer the tough ones at the end. Please stay muted. Turn off your camera, please, during the presentation. This is an introductory course on bluebirding and monitoring. I want you to know that the Bluebird box also attracts other secondary cavity nesters. And this is a very important point because if you decide to have trails or backyard boxes, we'll be promoting the conservation of Western bluebirds or mountain bluebirds. You will also be providing homes or nesting opportunities for chickadees and titmice and tree swallows and many other birds as well. So keep that in mind. I do offer personal coaching, and my monitor partner of 17 seasons, Tom Gary, will be helping me. We will do our best to keep this class to about an hour, but it's a lot of information to cover. Keep in mind, as I said, this is an introductory course, and we cannot go into as much detail as we'd like. I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to your instructor tonight. His name is Mike Azevedo, and he is Santa Clara County Coordinator and also a board member. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the class.
Let's see. Hello, Georgia, can you hear me? I just want to make sure I successfully got. Okay, good
and
deal.
You know what? I have to back up a little bit because I didn't say what we were going to cover. Can you go back a little bit? Just
yeah.
one. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. Okay, so these are the subjects that we're going to be covering in brief, okay, through the presentations. Why do bluebirds nest in nest boxes? Features of a good nest box, predator guards, bluebird habitat, placement of nest boxes, monitoring your nest boxes, and tools. Backyard nest boxes, setting up a bluebird box trail, mounting your nest box, why keep data, challenges, cleaning, and repairing. So, thank you.
All right, so this is a two-part training. So it's today and Friday. So and it is obviously being recorded. So I'd like to point out that the California Bluebird Recovery Program has county coordinators in many counties around the state. And they're here to answer questions about what birds you might find in your county and any questions about things that may have happened on the Bluebird Trail. This is the Eastern Bluebird. You won't see these in California. There's actually 3 different kinds of bluebirds. So we got this one that you're not going to see here, but this one you will. This is the Western bluebird. It's found in California, and I'll be referring to it quite a bit today. And finally, the mountain bluebird, also found in California. It is generally found at higher elevations. So many of you are going to see the mountain bluebird as opposed to the Western bluebird, or you may even see both. So why do bluebirds nest in nest boxes? One of the first things we have to clear up is the fact that not all birds use nest boxes. For example, here's a nest box. Here's a nest that you'll find on the ground of birds, and you've seen nests on the ground in crotches and trees and in any number of other places. Every bird species has its instinctive nest type. They evolved this way. There are about 20 local species you may find in your nest box of varying sizes. Today, we learn about the bluebird, but we are pretty good at helping many other species find housing. We'll be offering you more information and videos as we try and get better at what we do. And as we talk about to you individually about your particular situation, we might find out that you can actually help other cavity nesters far more easily than the bluebird. And there's nothing wrong with that. All of the other birds out there are just as deserving of our help. So helping oak titmice, chestnutback chickadee, mountain chickadee, astral flycatcher, barn owls, American kestrels. To give you the basics, we're going to stick to bluebirds today. But if you have any questions about these other birds, you can certainly ask us. And by the way, don't forget that that Georgette is manning the chat room. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and she'll be glad to answer them. And we'll try and handle anything that is more of a major question toward the end. So this is a woodpecker hole. Woodpeckers make their own nest cavities. They nest there and generally move on to make a new cavity the next year. This leaves behind a good natural cavity for other birds. Woodpeckers are therefore called primary cavity nesters. They make their own nests. You'll see a woodpecker using one of my boxes here. And oddly enough, woodpeckers occasionally are found in our nest boxes. And even more commonly, they decide to open up the entrances of our nest box for some reason. And that brings us to birds that don't build their own nest sites. They're called secondary cavity nesters, and that includes bluebirds. But there's a bit more. See this stump here. Notice that the heartwood is rotted out. This is how it is when the tree was cut down. There was a fissure running right up the middle of this tree. It was sick, and when a branch breaks off, the fissure can be exposed, making it a nesting opportunity for secondary cavity nesting birds. It's a very deep nesting cavity because it may take flying up and down several feet to get to the floor of the cavity. That's okay. It just takes more practice on the part of the young birds to get to their entrance. One thing about all these trees, those with woodpecker holes and heartwood rot, they're sick, and people take them down to prevent them from falling on people or property. And that brings us to exactly what is happening to cavity nesting birds. We are devastating our environment, destroying habitat on a global basis. It is clearly an ecosystem killer to turn a meadow into a parking lot. But to be honest, bluebirds are getting hit even harder. Habitat is everything an animal needs to survive: the food, water, shelter, space, places to raise your young. All of that is needed by every animal, and whatever is the least of these things is considered the limiting factor. Thus, if there is enough food for 100 birds, enough water for 50, and enough living space for 10, you will have 10 birds. You can have habitat teeming with resources for bluebirds, but if one component of their habitat is missing, you have no bluebirds. And that is what has happened here. Nesting sites are gone, but we can assist by replacing those nesting sites with artificial cavities called nest boxes. Bluebirds make grass nests. The grass may be coarse, as you see here, or it may be fine, whatever is available. Now and then they make it out of pine needles. It is whatever they have on hand, and you can recognize the nest of varying species of cavity nesting birds and their eggs. Bluebirds lay blue eggs. Rarely, a pigment abnormality leads to white eggs instead, but this is fairly rare. And speaking of color, I want to point something out. See this old timer nest box? That bird blends, doesn't it? It has been a long time since humans had to worry about animals knowing where we lived, where we raise our young. But cavity nesting birds still live in the wild kingdom. Life is precious, and their young are hunted 24 hours a day by all manner of predators, flying, crawling, climbing, slithering. The camouflage you are seeing here is not a coincidence. It is necessary. It is a necessary safety aspect of nest box installation. Because, believe it or not, humans have completely lost sight of the need for raising baby birds in secret. It is unfortunate that so many awful birdhouse designs are out there, bright and colorful, not suitable for camouflage at all. The birds are easy to see against the exteriors of these houses as they enter and leave, which leads to a rise in predation. Well, you may ask yourself, if these boxes are so bad, why do the birds ever use them? The answer is desperation. These birds are driven to reproduce. They have to go somewhere. And with a dearth of nesting opportunities, your neon colored death trap with a hole big enough for a great horned owl may be all that they can find. The fact you have eggs in your death trap birdhouse may seem like a huge victory, but the fact is, if your eggs disappear because the box was such a failure, you have wasted the opportunity to help these birds in desperate need. We removed cavities and replaced them with death traps. It's just not right. But we'll learn today what we can to turn this around. So a quick story. This is Edenvale Garden Park. It is on the site of a former Western-themed amusement park called Frontier Village in San Jose. The park closed in 1980, but it lives on in the memories of those who remember it fondly. And this art piece was a part of our Remembrance project. Birdhouses in the likeness of buildings that used to be on the property are placed around the park on 8-foot poles in the middle of clearings. As nostalgia pieces, these are wonderful. As bird nesting opportunities, not so much. First off, the assumption that was apparently made is that all you have to do is place a box with the right hole size and dimensions, and the birds will come. Well, this simply isn't true. Take the sign on this nest box, for example. It suggests that downy woodpeckers will use the box above, but downy woodpeckers are quite picky given that they are primary cavity nesters anyway. Well, we do see them on rare occasions in our nest boxes, but there is very little chance that they'll end up in this box. White-breasted nuthatches are very secretive and won't want to fly across a clearing to get to their nest. Western bluebirds require a fair amount of grassland of some kind, and this is questionable bluebird habitat. House wrens like thickets, and chestnut-backed chickadees prefer a canopy overhead. The only birds likely to use these boxes are house sparrows. And unfortunately, even if these nest boxes attracted native birds, their non-camouflage colors would make them a safety risk. They would require a ladder be hauled up all over the park to reach them. But never mind that, you can't open them anyway. They can't be monitored or cleaned out, which means that even if they were successful, eventually they'd fill up with material and be useless. It is these kinds of mistakes that we're trying to avoid. So that means we need to know what makes a good nest box. What is it that will lead to success? Success doesn't mean the eggs get laid and then get eaten. It doesn't mean the eggs hatch and then the babies get eaten, or that the eggs hatch and then the young hatchlings end up in a predator's stomach. It means the birds fledge. And let's face it, there are no guarantees. We don't blame the predators. They got to eat. In another life, I might be trying to save the snakes. But that doesn't mean that I'm trying to set these little birds up for failure. I want them to succeed, and they deserve housing at least as good as what we humans removed. So where do we get nest boxes? Well, if you are not set up to build them yourself, they can be found at bird feeding specialty stores like Wild Birds Unlimited and Los Gatos Birdwatcher, the Audubon Society, or others. and that I might not be aware of in your area. The proprietors of these stores do tend to know their way around nest boxes. That can't be said of hardware stores that have cheap, poorly constructed nest boxes. And you might be able to find boxes online. Well, unfortunately, no matter where you get your nest boxes, you really need to give them a close inspection. You will no longer be uneducated on nest box design, and you will be shocked to find what passes for commercial nest boxes. You need to be able to open them up. I've literally found nest boxes where removing the floor was the only way to access the box. There was no way to know what was happening inside and no way to know what you would discover. It's laughable. This box opens from the side. Note that the entrance hole seen on the right, and note also that the door pivots from the top. It opens upward. Old nests and things can easily be scraped out using paint scrapers, spatulas, or putty knives. Cleaning them out is easy. Side opening nest boxes are, to our mind, the best you can hope for in terms of how you're going to open, where you're going to open the nest box from. And here's why. Take this photo, which you will see used a couple of times. I opened up the nest box, and this female, who may be an experienced mother and used to be opening up her nest box every year, is just sitting there brooding her eggs. This is a side opening nest box. The entrance hole is directly above her. She is used to entering and leaving from that entrance hole. The fact that the wall just disappeared is likely concerning to her, but she can at least rest assured that her escape plan is still intact. This is a front opening nest box. It is also easy to clean out. But where is the entrance hole? It is on that wall that just disappeared when the door was open. Now, truth be told, I still tend to have birds that don't leave even when the front door disappears. But I can attribute that to either a possibility that instinct suggests to the birds that perhaps hunkering down is a safer alternative, or maybe the bird is experienced with my annual interruptions. But that escape plan I mentioned just disappeared with the front wall of her nest box. Now, I'm only talking about nerves here. Just because the nest box monitor might get a bird in the face, that doesn't necessarily mean that there is a quantifiable risk to the success of the nest. We've never studied the success of front opening versus side opening nest boxes, but I have no reason to think that there is much of a difference. When I suggest that side opening is better, I am doing so based on logic and supposition. If you have a front opening nest box, please don't worry about it. Keep using it. Our box gurus are still churning out front opening nest boxes, so we still have plenty of faith in them. We just have our favorite. Here is another side opening nest box, but notice that this one opens downward. The door pivots on the bottom, not the top like the previous one. It cleans easily, although stuff does not end up being scraped onto the door. Or in this case, it does get scraped onto the door. Nonetheless, if you open it up just a little bit, you can take a peek inside. The box that opens from the side but pivots from the top must be opened completely to check inside. This is another case of a good idea if you could do it, but don't worry about it if you end up with a box that pivots from the top. And I should mention that there are boxes that actually open from the roof. Top opening nest boxes are good for taking photos, but that is about their only advantage. They are hard to clean out. It is like having to remove disgusting poopy nesting material with a spoon. We don't recommend getting a top opening nest box if you can help it, unless you get one that opens from the top and the side. That overhang you see is very important. It serves a couple of purposes. It works to prevent rain from getting into the nest box, and it can defeat a cat sitting on top of the nest box trying to fish babies out with those retractable claws. And the dimensions of a nest box are also important. This includes the floor size and the distance from the floor to the entrance hole and the ceiling. For the floor, imagine baby birds in there trying to learn how to fly. We often have 6 baby bluebirds in there, and they're flapping their wings in each other's faces. Well, they can do it, with a smaller floor size, but it is less comfortable and too small, and it could start to hinder nest success. But too large a nest box and it could catch more wind or become more prominent than it needs to be and attract more attention. And the nest boxes should be durable. They need to at least last through the year. And raccoons in particular may try and rip the roof right off. A weak box could be a real problem for the birds living inside. Drainage is also important. I've opened up humid boxes before and it is unlivable. Note the triangles on the corners of this nest box floor. These are created by lopping off the corners when the box was being made, the corners of the floor. These seem like big holes, but keep in mind that nesting material will cover them up. Thus, no babies or eggs will ever have a chance to fall through them. On the other hand, they are conveniently located right where much of the water would pool and escape the box, and they are large enough to not to clog up. Drilling small holes is not quite as good because the material may block the holes. And of course, having the holes in the corners means no getting feet stuck while nest building. This really is the best way to provide drainage. And ventilation is also important, and it is best provided right along the top up there. The entrance hole size is very important. Western bluebirds need a 1.5 inch hole. Mountain bluebirds prefer a 1 9/16 hole, being just a little bit bigger. And by the way, there are other birds that require different size holes. It's fairly easy to find the size hole for the particular bird species you're looking for. The axiom we follow is to have an entrance hole no bigger than the bird species we want to use the nest box. I mentioned other birds earlier, and we do have bird species that can fit into a 1.25 inch hole. If that's the case, make it a 1.25 inches so that you can exclude house sparrows. Sadly, bluebirds have no choice but to compete directly with house sparrows. I'll talk more about chickadees and titmice, but I'll talk more about that. But chickadees and titmice don't need much to have such a big hole, and you can eliminate house sparrows from being a threat to them. You need an entrance hole big enough for the target bird species and no larger, so you can exclude the predators and the threats as possible. Kerfs are like a ladder. This is a Lee Pauser box, and the way he provides this ladder is to score a second piece of wood and glue it in place underneath the entrance hole inside the box. You can, as an alternative, just score the same place with a nail or screw. The problem is natural cavities are never sheer like a nest box is. There are no toe holds inside a nest box to use as the young bird is flapping its wings trying to reach the entrance hole. Truth be told, this isn't a problem for all of the different bird species. Many of these babies can do this fairly easily, but certain bird species, case in point, the violet-green swallow, need a little help because their little legs are further down the body and other birds than other birds, and toe holds are almost essential for them. And I need to mention that a perch is not just unnecessary, it is a bad thing. Notice how the female is holding on here. There is no perch. She doesn't need one, and native birds don't. She holds onto the hole and thrusts herself through the tunnel. All a perch can do is to help house sparrows and predators. No perch. And the nest box must be lockable closed. The twisty closer on the right is good enough for nest boxes that are on private property or hanging in a tree such that they won't be accessed by mischievous kids. But boxes on public property on poles or posts or mounted on trees really should have some form of security, such as a Phillips head screw. Most people don't carry screwdrivers when they're hiking, and thus it really is good enough normally. And once again, I want to talk about coloration. I've already talked about the camouflage value. Natural wood is a better color for a bird that has evolved to blend with natural wood colors. Unfortunately, nowadays we have other considerations as well, like climate change. if you would like to paint your nest box, it makes sense to paint those boxes that will be in the sun light colors, light blue or tan will add a bit of camouflage value as opposed to white. And let me point out that you can add a bit of camouflage coloration right around the hole, so you can have a light colored box, even white, that still provides some camouflage protection to the birds as they enter. And in addition to coloration, we are also looking at double roofing boxes. Gapped shade structures may provide a bit of cooling effect to help birds survive ever increasing ambient temperatures. Believe it or not, internal temperatures in a nest box are not necessarily better than those outside and have been found to be sometimes worse. Which brings us to insulation value. Thicker walls are better. We recommend 3/4 inch wood. Despite this, you will find endorsed nest box designs that use 1/2 inch wood, even endorsed by us. I know it's ironic, but keep in mind that these lighter wooded boxes are usually the ones built to be placed in trees under a canopy, such as hanging nest boxes. This would help with thermal regulation. And this is a natural cavity that was removed from a tree that was already being cut down. This natural woodpecker cavity can help us learn why natural cavities are known to be better than nest boxes in certain ways. A look at the bottom of this natural cavity reveals wide walls, much thicker than the thickest nest box. Heat and cold have been known to kill chicks, but this mainly happens during extreme temperature events. You will generally have an idea what temperatures you can expect, and if they are quite hot during the summer and your nest box locations are in direct sun, please plan accordingly. And you think this is not a real problem? Well, look at this actual commercial product. This is supposed to be a nest box, but it is made of thin plastic. It is a sign that many people who design commercial products have no actual expertise in the use of nest boxes. You have no doubt heard of cedar nest boxes, but cedar is really an Eastern US product. We don't have cedar readily available here. So what is easiest to get is redwood and pine. Plywood is also out there. Redwood is probably the best widely available type of wood to use. The redwood fence planks, freshly removed from a fence as it is being replaced, make for a good nest box material. And plywood is often discouraged in use for building nest boxes. But I should point out that Lee Pauser, and he's one of our most experienced nest box monitors, has had great success with plywood and used it routinely for all of his boxes. One criticism of plywood was the concern that it contains chemicals that might harm baby birds. Sand the inner walls very well to prevent any chemical residue. And finally, pine is often discouraged because it's expected that pine nest boxes won't last as long. Well, I've found that pine nest boxes are favored by woodpeckers, which could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. I certainly wouldn't want all of my boxes made of pine, but I enjoy immensely finding woodpeckers using the few pine boxes that I do have in use on my nest box trail. I've heard the old saying that each locked door between your goods and the thieves reduces the chances you will be a victim. The same goes for nest boxes. Every little thing you do to discourage predation has an effect, and even those predator guards that can be defeated still discourage predation. For example, the knoll guard. The knoll guard is made of wire. It is easy to build and place on your nest box. It looks kind of silly, but it works. Believe it or not, the bluebirds just land at the front of the wire and hop on over and into the box. Snakes, cats, and predatory birds, on the other hand, are presented with a puzzle that they may not be able to solve. We've used knoll guards with great success. And here is a guard called the stovepipe baffle. This is considered mainly a snake deterrent, though raccoons are not generally a fan either. A snake sees the hole from a distance and will try and climb the pole. The smaller snakes especially, will usually end up inside the pipe, which will dead end at the top, not allowing for access to the box. Not completely foolproof, but it is quite effective. And using every locked door theory, using both of these tools on the same box, just makes life that much harder for the snakes. And by the way, I have nothing against native snakes. I'm just trying not to feed them. Here is another predator guard called the wood guard. This is actually a 2x4 made into a wooden extension of the entrance tunnel. More wood between the predator and the chicks, that extra inch of wood can mean life or death. This is a plastic predator guard that is supposed to have used the same concept as the wood guard. We don't use it and we don't have much faith in it. While it theoretically should work, its flimsy nature concerns us. Why wouldn't you just get one of the other tried and true predator guards? And this one is not actually a predator guard. It is a plate protector to prevent woodpeckers from opening the entrance hole of your nest box. Now, I mentioned that generally habitat is everything that an animal needs to survive and reproduce. So what is it that makes good bluebird habitat? This photo of my then 4-year-old son walking through the grass shows an area that is excellent bluebird habitat. They actually do love it when the grass is clipped a bit lower to make hunting easier, but it lets me talk about bird-brained priorities. If you are a bird and you need to choose a place to raise your young, what is it that you are going to be looking for first? Well, how about food? You earn money to buy food, and therefore you need a place close to your job, right? If you had to come feed the kids every 10 minutes like a bird, you would make sure to have a house near the hunting grounds, or at least the store. Whatever the best analogy is to understand what a bluebird is looking for, you have to understand their need to find a house near food. And the best way to do that is to find the food and then look for the house. A suboptimal house near a good food source is better than a great house near a dead zone. And what is worse, they have to find an area that is good source for food in a month. They aren't going to be feeding anything but themselves for a couple of weeks while they incubate the eggs. And then the babies are young and don't eat that much, but a month out, the kids will be ravenous and demand food constantly. Once you have located a good source of food for the kids, it is time to find a place to raise them. That place may be unsafe, but if that is all that's available, that is where they will go. Open woodland generally has good grass for open woodland generally has good grass for ground dwelling insects. That's what they prefer. And you can imagine that before humans came along, old trees would provide good places for woodpeckers and natural cavities. Oak and coniferous forests with nice open clearings make great bluebird habitat. This is actually just a dormant oak, but it illustrates what a snag would look like. A snag would have no leaves and provides a good place for a nest. Snags are essentially dead trees. And I should point out that the oaks are great habitat in general. One of our heroes, Doug Ptolemy, has pointed out that oak trees across the country produce more lepidopteran host opportunities, that's butterflies and moths, than any other plants. In other words, those moths and butterflies can lay their eggs on an oak tree, and their larvae, known as caterpillars, can feed off the leaves, because 95% of all birds feed insects to their young to plump them up to adult size in a matter of weeks. Even seed-eating birds, oak trees, are called keystone species. Oaks are a favorite hangout for bluebirds. So where do you place your box, your nest box? It means a great deal in terms of success. In your neighborhood, you can find excellent bluebird habitat in parks, vineyards, cemeteries, golf courses, farms, schoolyards, corporate campuses, and open spaces. Here's a great Liebhauser quote. He pointed out that installing a nest box is like fishing. You can throw a fishing line into a pond, But if there are no fish in that pond, you aren't going to catch a thing. The same is true of putting up a nest box somewhere that has no native birds. If there are no native cavity nesting birds in your neighborhood, you will not get any native birds living in your nest box. In the case of Monterey County's Asilomar, as we've learned, went for 90 years with no bluebirds. Nest boxes were installed, and now they have bluebirds. This is a case of good habitat with one component missing. That was enough to keep nesting bluebirds away. Then one day, excess bluebirds from somewhere nearby tried to distribute into the Asilomar area, and when they looked for a nesting site, they actually found one. You may feel discouraged with the language that I've been using, but I hope you reach out to us and ask, because your area may be just like the Asilomar, with birds just waiting for a nest box. This is a video here talking about camping, canopy, excuse me. So if you have ever sat under grass under a tree, you will know that cooling value of a tree canopy. Well, birds know it too. Many bird species very much prefer a tree canopy over their nest. Bluebirds don't need a canopy over their nest box, but they have no problem having one either. And unfortunately, as climate warms, we may find that canopy nest boxes have a greater success rate than those bluebird nests out in the sun. Where to point your nest box. This is more critical for larger boxes, such as kestrel boxes, owl boxes, flicker boxes, but because they have bigger holes. But you don't want your nest box pointed at the wind or at the rain. And another thing, think of yourself as a nestling. You look out the entrance hole, and what do you see? When you are ready to fly on your first flight, will it be your last flight? Do you see a good place to go? Unfortunately, trouble is often waiting for baby birds. Aiming the nest box at trees and bushes gives the fledgling a goal to get to safety. Speaking of safety, what was likely a very safe box when it was first installed has become a real hazard. As mama comes flying, this is a wood duck box, as mama comes flying back to the box with food, is there something waiting for her? This is a tragedy waiting to happen. Keep that entrance clear so that the predators can be seen from a distance. In this case, no one even appears to be maintaining for overgrowth at all. When installing a nest box, it is important that you consider what kind of human activity happens nearby. Occasional passersby is one thing. Activity that may be there for a while is a real concern. For example, imagine you have set your nest up in the trees above this picnic area. It was just fine for days until the weekend comes, and suddenly you can't feed your babies without alerting everyone where your nest is. This can seriously impact success of the nest and even the lives of the babies, and it could have been avoided. Other trees in the area away from picnic tables are likely good choices, but next to the table would be a mistake. The same is true if you put up a nest box near your house. You know where you might be outside for long periods of time, your garden or working on cars or something. A nest box next to the garden could set up the box for failure unless you are willing to alter your schedule to help the birds. And I was looking for a photo of a house cat on a bluebird box, but this Liebhauser owl box pic with a bobcat will have to do. See, cats are an issue. If you put up nest boxes, consider the activity of cats in the area. Are there feral cats around? Is your cat constantly prowling the backyard? Do everything you can to prevent cat predation. Keep the nest box away from fences or structures that they could jump from. Raise the height and use a ladder to check it. You can even put spikes up on top of the box. Make a really long overhang over the box. Anything that can help prevent cats from predating the box. And house sparrows are common around houses. They've recently evolved to thrive around humans and at the same time be uber competitive with native bird species. They nest early and have up to 4 broods a year compared to native birds that typically have one or occasionally 2 broods. House sparrows will kill chicks, break eggs, and even have been known to kill adult native birds in the nest box. They're vicious, they're horrible, and humans intentionally introduced them here in the 1800s. Although they appear to be here to stay, you can have an impact on house sparrow populations locally by fighting back, putting a thumb on the scale behind bluebirds to help defeat this scourge that we thrust upon our native birds. Watch for house sparrows so you are aware of their presence where you hope to install nest boxes. I'll speak more about them in the challenges section. I use the word pesticides here because both herbicides and insecticides are bad news for bluebirds. Obviously, insecticides are intended to kill insects, but insects doused in herbicide, which is of course supposedly just to kill plants, it'll poison baby birds. We discover entire nests of dead baby bluebirds, and we often suspect pesticide spraying nearby to be the culprit. If you know that chemicals are being used nearby, is there any chance that you can talk them out of using them? Maybe you can talk them into using IPM, or integrated pest management practices, that are often just as effective as chemicals without harming the environment. One such IPM practice would ask you to use chemicals as a last resort. Preventive spraying, which often means using pesticides against insect problems that you haven't even shown up yet, should be discontinued. They ask that they only use chemicals as a last resort against insects that have become an overwhelming problem. This would allow bluebirds to try and get a handle on your lawn problems in a safe biological control that has no lasting negative effects on our children's health. And cattle are only considered a problem to nest boxes installed in pastures. This is a consideration only. Let us know if there's actually a problem. We'll find a solution. The main things we're worried that they're going to knock a pole over that has a nest box on it when they're scratching their back or something. And mowing is a consideration because frankly, we want to get along with the management, and management will get irked if they can't mow an area you just set your nest box up. If mowing happens, look at the situation to be sure the nest box won't be hit by the mower and that the pole or box isn't somehow in their way. And in effect, an active nest box can and will stop a construction project. I think it is a good thing that it can, but we need to avoid that. It is a fail to install a nest box and then have it stop construction on something. And sadly, I can actually give you at least one such story where construction was delayed by one of our nest boxes. If you ask about construction coming up, it will let management know that you care about their convenience. Construction in the area is a real consideration. How far apart do you place your nest boxes? Notice here that the nest boxes are actually back to back. The birds don't like to look at each other, but you can actually place them very close using a concept called pairing boxes. Paired boxes do not attract both the same species. Bluebirds and pretty much any bird is territorial. They don't want any other birds of their species hunting in their area. But swallows don't care about bluebirds. Swallows eat flying insects. Bluebirds eat ground-dwelling insects. They don't compete. So even though these boxes are paired, they often have active nests in both sides, but never both bluebirds or both swallows. On the other hand, both pairs of nesting parents have an interest in keeping predators away. They will all four actively defend both nest boxes, so long as the boxes are within 15 feet of each other. While the boxes in the photo are back to back, paired boxes can be installed within 15 feet that work the same way. The territorial nature of bluebirds and other cavity nesting birds suggests that you should keep your nest boxes a ways away from each other. But how far away really depends. The textbook distance suggested for Western bluebirds is between 100 and 200 yards. For mountain bluebirds, push it out to 200 to 300 yards. but I've heard that Western bluebirds need a distance of 100 feet, which is quite a bit closer. And my nest boxes are even closer than that, within 50 feet of each other. So what gives? Well, the truth is that the population of insects in an area has a lot to do with with how much hunting territory a bluebird will need. Along my trail, insects are plentiful, helped along, no doubt, by the horse pastures behind them. One day, I set up a GoPro camera, and after I walked away, it fell down. Resting in the grass, the insect life caught by the camera was unbelievable. There were ants and crickets and all kinds of insects crawling all over the grass. These birds have energy budgets. They can't spend all their day defending a food if it's plentiful. There is just no point to defending when they could just be out hunting. I mentioned earlier that we have a good number of cavity nesting birds living in California. The tree swallows that lay these eggs are one such species. In past training sessions, I gave quite a quick synopsis of other bird species, but this time I'll be sticking with bluebirds. If you're curious about the needs of other specific species, please let us know. Otherwise, if you are curious what kind of birds may nest in your box, you can expect us to look at the habitat and tell you what birds you can expect to show up. We'll be putting more information and videos on our website about other cavity nesting birds in California and how to help them out. 7:45. So how do you monitor a nest box? And why do you monitor a nest box? And how often should you monitor? Let's start there. We monitor about once a week during the nesting season. That season starts as early as February and lasts as late as August. How early nests appear in your neighborhood really varies, and you will eventually come to figure out when you can expect to see nests in your neighborhood. Answering the question of why you monitor, one good answer is predation. In other words, when predators come and eat your eggs or your babies. You can't babysit these birds. Often the best that you can do is to respond when it happens. I'll talk more about this when we discuss challenges, but helping a nest full of young birds through an attack, or sadly just trying to prevent the next attack, is likely to come maybe all that you can do. And knowing that something just happened to the occupants of the nest is the first step. Weekly monitoring is the key. Now, I talked about house sparrows. This is another reason to monitor every week. I'll discuss what to do when you find them in challenges, but you need to be watching so you can deal with the problem before it gets worse. And what you see here are two nests, one built on top of another. We don't want this. So you will hopefully show up each week, and on schedule, you will find an empty nest when all the birds have fledged. Hopefully it is on schedule, because finding an empty nest at the wrong time is a bad sign. That means they actually got eaten by predators or something. But either way, keep in mind that these birds are expert nest builders. They get rid of that old poopy nest, and so get rid of that old poopy nest and let them build a nice, fresh, clean nest. One reason is that the old nests may have parasite eggs or blowfly eggs or something like that. And reason number two is that the second nest in the box will be built on top of the first nest. That makes the nest taller, and the cup is closer to the entrance, which means that those babies are closer to the door. And being closer to the door is an invitation to predators who want to reach in and grab a snack. The predator guards are supposed to keep the babies farther away from trouble, and here a taller nest defeats that purpose. My daughter here is petting a horse that lives right next to the nest box, and that illustrates a possible issue: horsehair. Horsehair is well known to get used in nest boxes, and it could get wrapped around baby legs. Many a chick has been found hanging on horsehair. Check your box weekly, and you may have an opportunity to save the chick before they die from this or other problems you can't prevent ahead of time. And it's not so much I'm really coming down on horses here. The deal is that you may find any kind of issue when you come by every week. You might be able to save lives by showing up in the nick of time to save a bird that is in a dire situation. And now and then stuff falls apart, wood cracks, things fall off. You're a landlord and you don't have to plunge toilets. This is the easiest landlord job out there. So we ask you to monitor weekly. And now I want to show you how this could be so useful. It's a little something I call Bluebird math. The numbers just work very well. So it takes about a day to lay an egg. While laying eggs, the parents don't sit on the eggs. They will sit on them all at once they decide to start incubating. And because incubation starts at the same time, they all hatch basically at once. Now, let's say you check on Monday and you find 2 eggs. The next week on Monday, you find 5. That means that things are working just as the calendar up here shows. Brooding starts on Friday, so incubation begins. They may lay 2 eggs or they may lay 6. It all depends on how confident the birds are of what insect populations will look like in a month. Hunting is going to be easy only if you have only 2 mouths to feed. So if they don't have much confidence, they're only going to lay 2 eggs. Of course, I started the egg laying on Sunday, and it could happen on any day of the week. The key to the rest of this is just has to do with brooding begins. Once brooding begins, drop down 2 weeks to see when hatching should occur. And by the way, bluebirds follow the schedule, and it does vary for other species, but not by that much. For cavity nesting songbirds, it is close enough to use this system. It should work pretty well. And then they all hatch, and if you drop down 2 more weeks, that's when you get to near fledging age. And then you get those last 4 days. I love how this works because you just drop down 2 weeks from incubating down to see when they hatch, 2 more weeks to see when those last 4 days start. And then you will know that you are in that pre-fledged period. And what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal is that those last few days, the birds are practicing their flying skills and they're getting ready to fledge. In theory, when you open that box, the chicks that are that old may panic and try and fledge. Problem is that they may not be ready. If this is the case, they'll be flopping all over the ground and you will have to run around trying to catch them and stick them back into the box. To avoid this, you could just keep track of where in the cycle the birds are. And when you get to that last 4 days, that age, you can handle it like this. Those older chicks need to be fed every 10 minutes. The parents are working overtime. Just hang back and watch to see if the parents return with food. It should happen shortly. You may even hear the chicks calling out. All you need to know is that there are chicks. Make a note of it and you can move on. And let's talk about the technique used to check nest boxes. Actually, this is, let's see. First off, when to check. If it is cold or windy outside, that will certainly make the young uncomfortable. You're better off waiting until a time of day when the atmosphere outside is relatively comfortable. And by knocking ahead of the opening the nest box, you give any parents the opportunity to exit the box before you open it up. They won't always take advantage of it, but it is nice to give them a chance. And we advocate a no-touch policy. That doesn't mean you can't touch them if there is a solid reason to. For example, if a baby is stuck on horsehair, or you can pick it up to remove the hair. On the other hand, just picking the babies up is unnecessary if there's no other reason. If you don't need to, just leave them alone. The bird above, for example, is brooding eggs. Chances are the next time you show up, the mama will be gone and you can count the eggs. You can just write down that the female is brooding. And if she's there next time, you can wait another week. If you have to actually count babies, you can do that. Normally, I figure if I have a good count of eggs, I don't need to count the babies. They're always laying all over each other, and it is hard to get an accurate count anyway. And here is a screen that Georgette uses for monitoring. As she opens her nest box, she slips this screen up under the door and is able to block anything from falling out. It is easy to make with wire cloth, duct tape, and a carabiner. And how you collect your data is up to you. I've been known to write it down on scratch paper and transfer it to spreadsheets seen above. There are forms available on our website, and you can also print out and take with you. Things to note on my sheet, you see where it says tree, TRESBR. That's tree swallows, and the 4-letter abbreviation. And I noted that the bird was brooding. You notice that I write TRESY, which just means that there are young present. I don't bother counting the babies if I don't have to, unless I didn't get a good count of eggs. When I find an empty nest, it makes sense that it is empty based on the nesting cycles. I just figure that they fledged. I should have a number of eggs. When I find that empty nest, it might have bad eggs in it, eggs that never hatched. It may also have dead young birds, unfortunately. This is natural, unfortunately. But what I do subtract, what I do is subtract the bad eggs, the number of bad eggs, the number of dead babies that I found from the number of eggs that I previously counted. So notice the black entry. I had a nest with tree swallow eggs. The next week, the mother was brooding. This meant that the more eggs could have been laid. So I knew I needed to count blue beaks when I came back. I did, and I counted 5 chicks. Unfortunately, the nest was completely empty when I came back the next week. Georgette, I got the message. A snake had predated the baby birds. I knew that those birds should still have been there based on the cycles. And this is a really good opportunity to stop. So, Georgette, we're done with our first session.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were in a good spot there.
Yeah.
But we don't have any questions other than, is it possible to get a copy of Bluebird Math to use for reference? And I thought it was on the website and I was looking for it.
I know I provided it to her, I thought, but maybe I'm pretty sure I did, but we can ask her to put it up there.
Sure. So Rachel, we will send it to you. And I'm glad you asked because we just Trisha just put all the information on the website for us, so we do need to plug in some things that aren't there. So I have your email address. I'm sure I do because I have the list here. Rachel, but Rachel can't hear me, can she? Yes, she can. Oh, okay. She just gave it to me. Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. Okay, great.
So that was pretty much the only question?
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on, though. Let me write down her.
Okay, but
okay. Here's another question. I've seen some info that stated kerfs were not often used by Westerns as much as Easterns. So what's your take on that?
That's absolutely correct. And I don't even if they are used by Eastern bluebirds, that's news to me. But the I don't have a pic. I could probably find a picture of a violet green swallow. They literally are their feet are way farther down their body than even the tree swallow, and they just have a much more difficult time trying to flap their wings as they're trying to get up towards the entrance hole. So they are the one bird that really has an issue with needing kerfs. The bluebirds are just fine without them. Now, violet green swallows are an upland bird. So, for example, tree swallows, you find them usually in lower areas. They really like water. So at my county park where my trail is, there are 2 big, they're not big lakes, but they're certainly big ponds. They're quite large. And the tree swallows love that area. So but up in the hills above San Jose, we do have a lot of violet green swallows. And so in those areas, if I had nest boxes in those areas, I'd make absolute sure that I had curves. And by the way, Lee, his area, a lot of his area has a lot of violet green swallows. So that's one of the reasons why his nest boxes always have curves in them. Anybody in, who has, so I would just go ahead and put them in. That there's actually baseboards. If you go to Home Depot, sometimes I find baseboards that have grooves in them that where you can cut those into pieces and then glue those on underneath there. I mentioned that you can score it with a nail. That's what a lot of people do. I don't know how effective that is at providing curves, especially if the birds, really need them. But anyway, it's the violet green swallows are the ones that really need them, but it's just nice for the other birds too. Anything else? Oh, the chat is really filled up now. Georgette?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, cool.
We don't have any more questions.
All right, good deal. Well then, we will see you. It's 8 o'clock, so that's great timing. We will see you on Friday at 7 o'clock. Okay. And I hope everybody enjoyed it and learned we'll talk to you hopefully on Friday about what we can do. All right.
And Friday, it's important that you come back in order to complete all the information, complete the class. And also at the end, we're going to offer some very good resources for you because as I mentioned twice in the introduction, this is only an introduction and there's so much to learn. I know some of you out there are naturalists and conservationists already. There's just so much to cover.
We have a lot of really good nest box monitors, and walking the trail with them is a good way to learn. A good way to learn more. I ended up actually kind of apprenticing for a whole year with the person that I ended up taking over for. All right.
Okay, bye everybody. Thank you.
All right, see you on Friday. Hey, Dick.